Christmas Sunday, 50 days before Easter. And the epistle reading is taken from St. Paul's epistle to the Corinthians. Brethren, I may speak with every tongue that men and angels use, yet if I lack charity, I am no better than echoing bronze or the clash of cymbals. I may have powers of prophecy, no secret hidden from me, no knowledge too deep for me. I may have utter faith so that I can move mountains. Yet if I lack charity, I count for nothing. I may give away all that I have to feed the poor. I may give myself up to be burnt at the stake. If I lack charity, it goes for nothing. Charity is patient, is kind. Charity feels no envy. Charity is never perverse or proud, never insolent, does not claim its rights, cannot be provoked, does not brood over an injury, takes no pleasure in wrongdoing, but rejoices at the victory of truth. Charity sustains, believes, hopes, endures to the end. The time will come when we shall outgrow prophecy, when speaking with tongues will come to an end, when knowledge will be swept away. But we shall never have finished with charity. Our knowledge, our prophecy are only glimpses of the truth, and these glimpses will be swept away when the time of fulfillment comes. Even so, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I had the intelligence and the thoughts of a child. Since I became a man, I have outgrown childish ways. At present, we see as in a mirror darkly, but then we shall see face to face. Now I have only glimpses of knowledge. Then I shall recognize God even as he recognized me. Meanwhile, faith, hope, and charity persist, all three, but the greatest of these is charity. Please stand for the gospel. The gospel reading is taken from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. At that time, Jesus took the 12 apostles aside and warned them. He said, "Now we are going up to Jerusalem, and all that has been written by the prophets about the Son of Man is to be accomplished. He will be given over to the Gentiles and mocked and beaten and spat upon. They will scourge him, and then they will kill him. But on the third day he will rise again." The apostles could make nothing of all of this, and the meaning of our Lord's words was hidden from them, so that they could not understand what he said. When Jesus came near Jericho, there was a blind man sitting there by the wayside, begging. And he, hearing a multitude passing by, asked what the noise meant. And so they told him that Jesus of Nazareth was going past. Whereupon he cried out, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." Those who were in front rebuked the man and told him to be silent. But he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Then Jesus stopped and gave orders that the man should be brought to him. And when the man came close, Jesus asked him, "What wouldst thou have me do for thee?" "Lord," he said, "give me back my sight." Jesus said to him, "Receive thy sight, thy faith hath brought thee recovery." And at once the man recovered his sight and followed Jesus, glorifying God. All the people, too, gave praise to God at seeing this wonderful work. This is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. We have some announcements. The Mass this evening is offered for the repose of the soul of Barbara Kelly. You're asked to join us here at Saturday, March 4th at 6 p.m. in the auditorium to watch the film Ignatius of Loyola. Tickets can be purchased at the rectory. Our next film in the Vatican film series is the animated film Secret of Kells. And it will be shown Saturday, March 11th at 6:30 in the gymnasium. This year's Lenten Missal, the Adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, this year's Lenten Mission, Adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, will run from Monday, March 13th to Wednesday, March 15th. There will be 2 sessions to choose from, either 9 a.m. or 7 p.m. Please read the bulletin article on 40 Days for Life. It runs from March 1st to April 9th. Our next question on and answer on ad orientem, that is to say facing the altar instead of facing the people, is Sunday, March 12th, 10:30 in the rectory dining room. Next month, Star Outreach to the Homeless request the item of bathroom paper. Take home a copy of the weekly bulletin to find details on all these events and more. This is the final sermon in a series of sermons basically about the new theology. I began by talking about the fundamental principles upon which traditional Catholic theology is based. And those fundamental principles are derived from the perennial philosophy, Philosophia Perennis. Then I wanted to discuss at some length the major influences that have affected the new theology. And these influences were 2. First of all, the epistemological critique, which began with René Descartes, who died in 1621. The main thesis of that position, of that philosophical movement, is that what we know is the internal, intramental idea, not the external thing as it is in itself. And then Immanuel Kant greatly elaborated on that by pointing out that what we know in its entirety is created, constructed, fabricated by our mental faculties. So what we know is not the external world in itself, but what we know is the way that it appears to us, having been entirely remodeled, as it were, by our mental faculties. The reality outside the mind is assumed, but it remains in and of itself unknowable. Now, it's important to understand that the new theology accepts this position as the epistemological foundation of theological speculation. So this view of knowledge underlies and supports and grounds the speculation of the new theology. There's another major trend in modern philosophy that has had a profound effect and influence upon the new theology. And this is the movement called process philosophy. So last week I talked about the epistemological critique. This week I want to talk about process philosophy. Not for itself, but because it has had and is presently continuing to have a tremendous influence upon Catholic theology. Very simply stated, process theology is the denial of substance. Substance does not exist. There is no substance. There are, therefore, no complete things, no entities which actually exist as independent, incommunicable beings. There are no things with a determinate, fixed essence. Each thing separate from and exterior to everything else. By way of example, we each exist. We have a fixed essence. We are material, living, sentient, rational substances. That doesn't change. From the instant of our conception, we are human. And to be human remains with us until death, and then is restored to us after the resurrection. In the time between death and the resurrection, we live as separated spiritual substances, fully alive, fully conscious, fully active, and identically the same person that we were before. But the integral humanity is not restored until the resurrection of the body. So, from the standpoint of process philosophy, no thing exists. Instead, there is only random process, sheer becoming, without any purpose, without any direction. And out of this constant, ongoing process, no stable, fixed thing ever emerges. Now, these, they often call them, well, put it this way, there's only then an ongoing stream or flow of interdependent particles or events or states or happenings, all these words are used, and these particles are always in motion, never arriving at rest. Now these states or these events or these particles in flux never emerge from the process as individual stable things, because the instant of their emergence is simultaneously the instant of their passing away and their disappearance. So at the instant that any particular particle arises in this flow, it totally exerts itself and exhausts its action in the production of another particle. And since it exhausts itself entirely, in this process of production, it passes away even as it comes to be. So you can't really say that it comes to be at all. Because if it exists for a metaphysical, unmeasurable instant. Because the incident, the instant of its, quote, existence, unquote, is identical with the instance of its total self-depletion. Now, this process that I described is not to be thought of as a process of things coming into being and lasting at least for a little while, and then passing out of existence. That's not the point at all. Even though the words that we use, which are borrowed from an expressive ordinary experience, would suggest that. These particles, which are always in passing, produce like or similar particles, and they do this from instant to instant. And this generates a series, which is a succession of similar particles in flux. And then when new conditions arise, a new series is generated or arises, replacing the earlier series. But all series, as rising and falling, appearing and disappearing, are interrelated and interconnected as flowing in and out of each other. And so reality has been described as a continuous, unbroken, uninterrupted dance of energy in which the ever-flowing particles or states or events are mutually interdependent. Again, keep in mind that every particle is inside of every other particle, so that no particle ever emerges or breaks through as outside any other particle. And so, no distinct being, no thing, no substance ever comes to exist. Now, when I say outside of, you and I are outside of each other. We are separate, distinguished units, so that together we constitute a plurality. From the standpoint of process philosophy, there is non-difference between us, no difference. And we do not constitute a distinct, discrete unit. Therefore, a multitude does not exist. There's no such thing as plurality. No unit substance, no plurality, no difference. In Buddhism, this nothingness or no-thingness is named sunya, which means emptiness. And a similar doctrine is found in Advaita Vedanta, a position taken by Shankara in the 9th century, and that position was called unqualified non-dualism. There is no duality. It's not that everything is one, it's that everything is non-different from everything else. You know, the one who expressed that theory perhaps most succinctly and most successfully, and in an easy to understand way, is Nagarjuna, who was a great Buddhist logician, as I said, of the 9th century, and he wrote a book called The Dialectics of the Middle Way. Shankara was not the 9th century, I got that one wrong. And in the Dialectics of the Middle Way, Nagarjuna wrote as follows: no thing comes into existence, nor does anything ever pass out of existence. In other words, no complete substance ever emerges from the process. And since no complete substance ever comes into being in any stable sense, it follows that no complete substance ever passes away, because that can only pass away which first comes into existence. So that if nothing comes into existence, nothing can be said to pass out of existence. But there's a problem here, of course. How is all of this, how in all of this do we account for the error, the mistaken perception of reality as distinct individual things? And the answer given is that it's the velocity or speed with which these particles or events stream and flow that creates the impression, the illusion really, that there are separate individual things with a fixed identity and stability. Now, we often imagine that each of us is a self, an individual entity, and that we are the subject, the one who has these experiences, these perceptions, sensations, apprehensions. But that is also denied by process philosophy. Instead, the fact is that there is only the illusion of a determinate self. But behind the illusion of the alleged self is simply what has been described as an aggregate of psychophysical properties or energies in process. In other words, the self is nothing more than a series of similar or like particles in flux. And this consciousness continuum, which we apprehend in ordinary experience, is really, and in fact, no more than a series of successive momentary mental impressions passing one from the other, one out of the other, each state producing its like. And this regular stream or procession of similar states gives the mistaken impression, creates the illusion that there is some underlying subject self. No. There is no person, no soul. What we call the conscious self is simply a series of successive, similar mental states or events. Now that's a very inadequate summary of the main thesis of process metaphysics. Now inevitably, this worldview tends to be non-theistic and cannot easily accommodate a deity or a god. And so in order to incorporate these theories into Catholic theology, both Catholic theology and process philosophy had to be somewhat revised. The difficulty is, or one difficulty is, that in the process of this revision, this adaptation, the primacy of place, the role of norm and standard, was given to process philosophy. And the attitude of the new theology theologians to our Catholic tradition could be simply stated as will remodel to suit. The whole point was that Catholic teaching should be assimilated to and accommodated to the structure of contemporary philosophy so that it could be accepted by contemporary man, by secular man. I'm going to close with just an example of this remodeling to suit. When the English version of the 1969 Missal was being prepared, the Bishops' Committee on Liturgy, English in the liturgy, I should say, they met together with some of the bishops, and they wanted to bring in some experts from science and psychology especially, who could maybe perhaps identify anything in the liturgy that was out of fashion or archaic, or perhaps not acceptable or comprehensible to modern man. Well, these experts right off the bat said it's soul, the word soul, no longer a viable concept. They said the resurrection of the body may have some justification in contemporary physics, but the idea of a soul, no. So what did the bishops and their committee do? They took the word soul out of the Missal entirely. Remember we used to say, "O Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldst enter under my roof. Only say the word and my soul shall be healed." It was changed to say only the word and I shall be healed. Even in the funeral mass, the only reference was to the resurrection of the dead. Nothing said about the immortality of the soul, and of course nothing said about purgatory, because if the soul goes, so goes purgatory. Even though these are defined doctrines of the Church, how easily they could be misplaced, not misplaced, just dumped and thrown out in order to accommodate contemporary mindsets. Thanks be to God, Benedict XVI, when he gave us this new translation of the Roman Missal, put those words back in, or put the word soul back into the liturgy. So now we use the word again. He made a number of other changes too that were in favor of orthodoxy. Mary was very rarely addressed as ever virgin. Benedict put that back too. So it's important to see that what is happening in the new theology is a deliberate effort to recreate Catholic theology, to reshape, remodel our tradition, which we truly believe is divine revelation, not just human wisdom, but divine revelation. But they want to remodel that so that it fits into contemporary mindset. And they don't care how much tearing or cutting or burning or slicing they do in order to fit these two things together. Catholic theology on the one hand and contemporary philosophy on the other. The difficulty is that no matter how you cut, burn, tear, or scrape, there is simply no way you can put them together, because as I've emphasized so many times, they are, in their fundamental, supporting, foundational principles, completely contradictory to each other.